Hey everyone, Tactics here, bringing you guys another update on 9.1, the Chains of Domination. Now, as of the recording of this video, we haven't yet seen a new build go onto the PTR, but what we do have is actually a couple of interviews with game director Ian Hazzikostas, one translated Chinese interview, and of course the more recent interview he had with Preach over on Twitch. Now, before we get into these, please make sure you guys like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video to be notified when I post more Warcraft content, and let's get started beginning with the Chinese interview. Now, this was a fairly long written interview. It's been translated over on Wowhead, and I will post that in the description if you guys want to read it, but for those of you that don't want to scroll through all of this text, basically, he talked about how TBC and 9.1 won't overlap. Which was, I think, to most people, they knew this was not going to happen, even though there was a slight overlap at the beginning of Shadowlands. But they are going to be separating those by a decent amount. My expectation, honestly, is they're probably going to release TBC first and 9.1 later, but I guess we'll see how that ends up working out. They then talked a fair bit about the new Mythic Plus rating system. So they specifically talked about how they might put in separate or combined score for both Fortified and Tyrannical. So to get the highest score, you're going to have to push keys on both weeks just to kind of increase participation on Tyrannical. Honestly, at this point, I'm not sure why they're sticking with the separating Fortified and Tyrannical. The introduction of this score would kind of be the perfect opportunity for them to kind of eliminate both and just kind of go with general scaling, honestly. But I've seen some arguments that it differentiates the dungeons, but personally, I don't know. Tyrannical just feels so much worse to play on than Fortified once you start getting into higher keys, and it just doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to have both of them separating the weeks still. They also talk about how they could use this new ranking system to kind of eliminate the whole Valor stages of like complete all +5s, complete all +10s, complete all +15s, and instead just have X score. So if you push one dungeon really high, you can kind of have a lower dungeon, looking at use Sanguine Depths. Aside from that, though, they did specifically mention how affixes punish melee more than ranged. In particular, Storming and Spiteful are quite bad, and looking at specifically nerfing those two affixes, there won't be any new affixes besides the seasonal affix, but specifically Storming and Spiteful are likely to see nerfs, so melee players can rejoice. In terms of class stuff, they did say there were plans for catch-up mechanics for alts, because right now they need to spend a lot of time grinding when they hit max before they can actually do anything. And they're also working on a system to refund, and here it is, refund and reforge legendaries in 9.2, not 9.1. So we'll see this in 9.2, and that was actually in Preach's interview where he confirmed that would be coming in 9.2 and not 9.1. Speaking of Preach's interview, that is also on Wowhead. There's the video for it if you guys want to listen to it. I will post that in the description. But again, kind of the quick stuff and the big points. Korthia, the World Zone, is going to have a Mana Pearl-like system for gearing, though it's going to not have the randomness of Benthic, apparently, so we'll see how that shapes up. Hopefully it's nothing like Benthic, because that was not great, randomly gambling your Mana Pearls until you got the right thing with like tertiary stats and then upgrading it. Yeah, not great. They talked about the new legendary currency, Mega Soul Ash. Soul Cinders, I think it got changed to, but it was called Mega Soul Ash for a little while there. Only coming from layers 9 to 12, so your stockpiled Soul Ash will only be for getting your new legendaries up to rank 4, and then this new currency will be to get those to rank 6, I believe, is 6 or 7. I think it's 6. They talked about Conduit Energy. They don't say it's imperfect, but it's probably remaining in the game. Their purpose, they say, is just to make people feel like they don't need to swap for literally every activity or every boss fight or every dungeon. I mean, I kind of get it, but honestly, I mean, I just think Conduit Energy, it doesn't really... There's no point to Conduit Energy. Moving on, I believe they said we have tier sets coming in 9.2, not 9.1. There was some forecast changes, but I'll go over that in a second, because we actually have an article on that separately. Aside from tier set to 9.2, which is great news, they said they're happy with how Covenants are currently going. Aside, there's some balance issues that they plan to address, but they are not planning on opening them up as of yet. So no ripcord pulling yet. In terms of specific class stuff, they mentioned Holy Paladins and how their default playstyle, also being the best for damage, is not great. And they want to make Holy Paladins in particular have to choose between damaging and healing. So likely to see some nerfs to them in the near future. And they also specifically mentioned AMZ from DKs and how it's too good, possibly adding a total absorption cap. I'm not a big fan of that, honestly. It was a bit clunky. I'd rather see a cooldown increase. Maybe get a 3 or 4 minute cooldown, I think is much better. And they also specifically mentioned rogues lacking utility and possibly needing something in raids. They bring a ton in dungeons, but they need something in raids. Aside from that, they did get asked about the AoE cap. They said there's room for evolution. They don't want only a few specs to have uncapped AoE, but they want to give niches like 2 and 4 target cleave to people. But we'll have to see how they actually address this, because right now that's exactly what they have. They have the uncapped specs kind of dominating, and then kind of like the 5 target specs being those fillers, like things like hunters and monks, which do big damage to like 5 or 6 targets. They're kind of squeaking in there, but realistically, all those specs that are kind of capped at lower targets, they're not doing well in Mythic Plus, in particular, and of course sometimes in raids as well. But we'll have to see how that shapes up. I definitely agree. I mean, classes should have niches, but yeah, the whole only a few specs can do mass AoE, just it doesn't make sense. Now the Torghast stuff. Let's look at the Torghast stuff. So there is a bunch of system changes for Torghast. Namely, there's no more death counter in Torghast. You're going to be rewarded now based on your score. So if you get a score, you'll get stars at the end of your run. I believe currently runs are 5 floors, and there's like 2 bonus floors, but we'll have to see how that shapes up. It's not fully implemented yet. But basically, you'll get a score at the end of your run, which is all going to be based on how many souls you rescued, number of deaths you had, what's your biggest hot streak, the time it took you, and the number of urns you destroyed. And obviously the higher your score, the better. Your rewards at the end, so you're always going to get some sort of reward now instead of just dying out. And then what's going to happen is you'll get up to 5 stars for this. So 5-star system, and if you get 4 stars here, you'll unlock the next layer. Now there's some things like there's a Torghast talent tree. I don't know if they show that. Doesn't look like they show that here. But there is a Torghast talent tree, kind of like Visions, that little extra talent tree that only works in Visions. So they're introducing that. They're also introducing things like Torments, which are apparently kind of a little bit like the Vision affix, a little bit like Mythic Plus affixes, as well as positive things called Blessings, I don't believe are in yet. So some example, more physical damage done for all players and enemies. 5 or more enemies are within 10 yards, they deal 10% increased damage, things like that. So little negative effects, but also there's going to be positive effects as well. Not sure quite how I feel about this yet. This hasn't been fully implemented yet. It's partially implemented on the PTR, but we expect further iteration. So we'll have to see how that shapes up in the future. But that is it for the new 9.1 stuff we've seen this week. So if we do end up seeing a build later on, I will be sure going over it. So make sure you like and subscribe to be notified when I post next. You can also follow me over on Twitch, where I stream High Mythic Plus, Mythic Rating from a tank POV, and we'll also be streaming all of the Sanctum of Domination raid testing. That is all for now, though, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.